The sky was split open with the glow of drifting plasma fire, the color of a dying sun reflected on metal ruins and dragon bones. Captain Rian Salas walked through the silence with his rifle lowered, his armor smeared with ash and dried blood. The war had ended 3 days ago, at least that was what the command networks claimed. But no peace ever truly followed such endings. The ground still trembled with heat from orbital bombardments, and the air stank of ionized smoke and burnt ozone. He passed shattered helmets, twisted banners, and the blackened carcasses of dragon war beasts, each large enough to crush a shuttle. His HUD flickered intermittently, unable to connect to the military satellite grid. Most of it had been destroyed. Somewhere in the distance, an emergency beacon pulsed weakly, its rhythm fading, as if the world itself were breathing its last. Then he heard it, a sound not of machine or storm, but a low, resonant hum, almost like a heartbeat. Rian turned toward a collapsed energy tower. Beneath its molten frame, a movement, a glimmer of dark scales shifting. He raised his weapon, breath freezing in his throat. The dragon was enormous, her wings torn, one eye sealed shut by burns that still smoked faintly. She looked ancient, far older than any battlefield survivor should have been. Her scales shimmered with faint bioelectric light, nanite filaments crawling through her body, repairing what they could not save. She lifted her head weakly, her golden iris flickering like a dying star. Between her foreclaws lay something small, curled and trembling. A hatchling, its scales dull and soft, eyes wide with fear. The great dragon's wings wrapped around it protectively, as if she could still shield it from the end of the world. Rian hesitated. His orders had been clear: eliminate all surviving enemy bioforms. The dragons were living weapons, genetically engineered centuries ago, long before the war consumed both their makers and their victims. Yet, looking at this dying creature, he felt no victory. Only exhaustion. Only a hollow ache that echoed the quiet between her labored breaths. She spoke, not with words, but through the static hum in his neural implant. Her voice was not sound but presence, vast and trembling. Human, do not fear me. My time is ending. The mental contact was raw and uneven, like two incompatible frequencies struggling to harmonize. My son, he will not survive alone. Rian's heart pounded. He had seen telepathic communication before, but never one so filled with warmth, with sorrow. She was dying, yet her mind clung only to the child. The hatchling pressed closer to her chest, letting out a faint, melodic cry. It sounded almost human. He lowered his rifle slowly, metal scraping against his armor. The dragon's breath grew shallow. Around them, the sky rumbled with distant thunder, the last of the orbital carriers leaving orbit. She whispered again, fading. Let him stay with me, until the end. Rian looked at her, then at the hatchling whose scales glowed faintly in the dim light. For the first time in years, his duty and his humanity collided, and for once, the latter did not yield. He knelt beside the dying dragon, switching off his weapon's targeting lens. The stars above flickered through drifting smoke, reflected in her fading eyes. And in that moment, as two enemies watched the sky burn, the first spark of something new, something neither war nor command could define, was born in the silence between their breaths. The night deepened into a haze of violet mist and drifting ash. The wreckage around them pulsed with faint residual energy, each fragment humming like the dying nerves of a machine too proud to admit defeat. Rian sat by the remains of his shuttle, the dragon's enormous silhouette half buried in the metallic dust. She no longer moved, but the faint bioluminescence in her scales glowed in rhythmic pulses, like the slow heartbeat of a star. The hatchling hadn't left her side once. He tried to repair his comm unit, but the device only sputtered static. The orbital network was down, no one would hear him even if he screamed into the void. He watched the small creature curl closer to its mother's chest. Its tiny claws clung to a fragment of her broken armor plating, organic and mechanical fused together in ancient design. Rian had read about it in classified reports. Dragons weren't purely biological. Their blood carried metallic nanites, relics of a civilization that once believed flesh and machine should share one purpose. Humanity had simply inherited the war they began. A faint tremor vibrated through the ground. The mother dragon stirred weakly, her mind brushing against his again. The contact was gentler this time, the words like fading echoes through a neural storm. Asterisk, he is frightened. I can no longer hold his mind within mine, asterisk. Rian swallowed hard. He wanted to speak but found no words that mattered. The dragon's gaze fixed on him, one dim golden eye filled with something he hadn't seen since the war began. Trust. Do not let them make him what they made of me, she whispered. Asterisk, he will hear their lies, their machines will teach him hate. Don't let them, asterisk. Her massive form shuddered. A surge of light burst across her body, nanites leaving her bloodstream, evaporating into the air as streams of glittering dust. She was disassembling herself. Her flesh turned translucent, then crystalline, then light. The hatchling whimpered, a thin high-pitched sound that pierced through Rian's armor like grief-given form. When the glow finally dimmed, only her shadow remained burned into the metal beneath her, like a memory printed in atoms. The child collapsed beside it, its small body trembling in silence. Rian removed his helmet. The air was bitter and metallic, but he needed to feel it, needed to know the moment wasn't a dream. He stared at the little creature, at the ashes that drifted upward like motes of data escaping a dying core. He thought of his own son, the one buried under a collapsed dome years ago during a dragon raid. He had imagined this very species as monsters. Now, kneeling before one's remains, he saw only the same thing that haunted every parent, the fear of leaving a child alone in a cruel universe. He spoke softly, his voice rough from smoke and memory. You can stay. The hatchling's eyes lifted to meet his, two bright silver orbs reflecting starlight and sorrow. The words hung in the cold air, carried through the debris and silence of a dead battlefield. Above them, the stars flared and flickered as if recording the moment in the vast memory of the cosmos. And though neither of them knew it yet, the echo of that single decision began to ripple far beyond the horizon of their broken world. The wind over the plains of Vareth carried the scent of ionized sand and scorched circuitry. Rian walked through it with the hatchling perched awkwardly behind him, its wings folded tight, tail dragging faint trails in the dust. The land stretched endlessly, a graveyard of fallen skycraft and fractured satellites. He had salvaged what he could from the wrecks, ration packs, a solar blanket, and a portable fusion lamp that hummed like a caged sun. Every night, under the dim aurora of drifting plasma clouds, he and the hatchling made camp among the remains of two civilizations that had forgotten how to forgive. The creature had begun mimicking him in strange, subtle ways. It tilted its head when he spoke, blinked at the rhythm of his words, even reached for food using its claws the way a child might use hands. Its name, he decided, would be Kale, simple, human, and somehow right. When he whispered it for the first time, the dragonling responded with a faint echo in his thoughts, not as language but as emotion, a flicker of recognition. The neural contact startled him. It was the same telepathic link its mother had used, though far weaker, like the fading signal of a distant transmitter. As days turned to weeks, Rian repaired an old rover he found half buried beneath the dunes. Its AI core was fragmented, full of corrupted memories, but it still functioned enough to navigate. He strapped supplies onto its chassis, and Kale rode on its back, wings spread like sails catching alien light. Sometimes, when the rover's sensors picked up metallic debris, Kale would hum softly, resonating at a frequency that caused the fragments to vibrate. It was as if the child could speak to the remnants of machines, to the lost nanite veins that still pulsed beneath the planet's crust. One night, as Rian adjusted the comm dish trying to re-establish contact with the orbital relay, Kale approached him, eyes gleaming faintly in the blue light. The dragon's small voice entered his mind without warning, hesitant, broken. Why do you stay? Rian froze. He had not expected it to learn words so quickly. He wanted to say he stayed out of duty, but the truth burned deeper. Because I made a promise, he murmured. Kale lowered its head. To her. He nodded. To her. And maybe, to you. The dragonling blinked, the silver in its eyes flickering like a digital pulse. Asterisk, I dream of her voice. She says you will take me where the sky never ends, asterisk. He stared into the horizon, where the wreckage glowed faintly under the twin moons. Maybe we'll find it together. As dawn rose over the plains, a signal broke through the static on his calm human voices, fragmented, sharp, commanding. They had detected a heat signature moving across the forbidden zones. Rian's chest tightened. They were coming. He looked at Kale sleeping by the lamp, wings curled around itself like a blanket of light. For the first time since the war ended, he felt the cold certainty that what he had saved was more than a child. It was a spark of something the galaxy had long forgotten, hope disguised as a dragon. The rover's warning siren shattered the stillness just before dawn. Rian was already awake, his instincts honed by decades of war. He shut off the lamp, crouched low, and scanned the horizon through his visor's enhanced optics. Faint energy trails shimmered in the air, military-grade reconnaissance drones sweeping the desert in tight formation. The human dominion had found them. Their transponders pulsed in steady rhythm, broadcasting identification codes across every spectrum. To the Central Command, he was no longer a decorated veteran. He was a deserter harboring a biological weapon. He turned to Kale. The young dragon stirred, scales flickering with confusion as the distant hum of engines reached their ears. We need to move, Rian whispered, strapping on his rifle and loading the rover's energy core to full capacity. Kale obeyed, clinging to the rover's side, eyes wide and alert. The child's bioluminescence dimmed instinctively, some inherited defense mechanism from the war-bred dragons. They sped through the dunes as morning light bled across the horizon, the vehicle's propulsion system kicking up spirals of glassy dust. Behind them, streaks of plasma fire carved the sky. The drones were not there to capture, they were programmed to erase. Rian rerouted all power to the shields, the rover groaning as systems overloaded. He swerved toward a canyon where remnants of old alien architecture jutted from the ground, massive, obsidian structures pulsing with dormant circuitry. The first blast hit. The shockwave tossed the rover sideways, slamming Rian against the console. Sparks danced across the controls. Kale screamed, not through sound but through the neural link that bound them. The cry rippled through Rian's mind like a storm of light, and the ancient ruins around them suddenly responded. The canyon erupted in cascading beams of energy, symbols lighting up on the black walls. The air shimmered with heat and memory. The drones hesitated, their targeting systems scrambling under interference they couldn't decipher. Kale's eyes blazed silver as arcs of energy flowed between his claws and the alien machinery, syncing with his pulse. Kale, stop! Rian shouted, shielding his face. But it was too late. The child had awakened something buried for millennia. A blinding surge radiated outward, melting the drones midair. Their remains fell like sparks into the sand. The resonance died slowly, leaving the world silent again, except for the sound of Rian's ragged breathing. Kale collapsed, trembling, smoke rising faintly from his scales. Rian lifted him, feeling heat pulsing beneath his skin like a reactor on the verge of overload. What did you do? The dragonling's voice was faint but clear in his mind. I remembered. Rian stared into the glowing ruins, realization dawning like a cold dawn. These structures were not human, nor dragon, they were older, builders of both species' genomes, architects of the same war that had consumed their descendants. And now, through Kale, they were stirring again. Above the canyon, the sky burned with the reflection of orbital sensors adjusting course. Rian knew they had only delayed the inevitable. The galaxy would not ignore what had just awakened in the desert. The canyon was silent now, but the silence felt alive. The alien structures still glowed faintly beneath the sand, whispering frequencies too low for human ears yet sharp enough to vibrate in Rian's skull. He crouched beside Kale, checking the small creature's vitals through a portable med scanner. The readings flickered wildly, heart rate inconsistent, neural activity off the charts. It was as if Kale's mind was running a million simulations at once, pulling fragments of memory from a civilization that had vanished before humans had even learned to leave their world. He poured water from his ration tank over the dragonling's face. The glow in Kale's eyes dimmed to a soft shimmer, and the psychic static between them began to settle. "They see me now," Kale whispered weakly inside his thoughts. "The stars are watching." Rian glanced upward. Above the haze of the upper atmosphere, tiny shapes moved against the starlight, recon satellites, council drones, even conclave beacons from the dragon fleets orbiting on the far side of the planet. Everyone had noticed the energy surge. Whatever had happened here had not just been a flare, it had been a beacon. They had no more time to hide. By nightfall, a shuttle descended into the canyon. Sleek in silver, bearing the insignia of the Interstellar Council. Its thrusters carved perfect circles of molten glass into the ground as it landed. Rian raised his weapon instinctively, but a woman's voice called out through a translator field, calm and precise. "Captain Rian Salas of the Dominion, stand down. We're not here to arrest you." Lyra Ven stepped out, her face illuminated by the shuttle's blue exhaust. She wore the robes of a diplomat, not a soldier, yet her presence carried quiet authority. "The Council has seen the broadcast," she said. "The telepathic projection that your dragon unleashed, it was transmitted through every major relay in known space." Rian frowned. "Projection? That was no transmission. He didn't do it on purpose." She looked past him, toward Kale, who was now awake and watching silently. "It doesn't matter. The message reached both our species. We saw what you saw, the memories. The war from both sides. The mothers, the children. The fear." Her voice softened. "They want you to speak, Rian. At the Grand Convergence on Echelon Prime. Both governments will be there." He shook his head. "I'm a soldier, not a symbol." Kale's thought brushed his mind gently. "You are both." Rian stared at the young dragon, realizing how much he had grown, not in size, but in presence. His eyes no longer looked like a child's. They reflected galaxies. Above them, the comlink on Lyra's wrist flared to life, council frequencies blending with dragon signals in perfect sync. For the first time in recorded history, humans and dragons shared an open channel. Rian's hand trembled as he looked to the stars, knowing that what began as a dying mother's plea was now something far larger. He whispered, mostly to himself, "If words could end a war, why did we ever start one?" And from somewhere deep within the ruins, an ancient mechanism pulsed once more, recording every sound, every heartbeat, as if preparing for the moment when one man's answer would echo through the stars. The hull of the Grand Convergence shimmered like the inside of a living nebula. Holographic stars drifted above the assembly while human delegates and dragon envoys faced one another across a chamber of transparent alloy suspended in orbit over Echelon Prime. Below them turned a half-terraformed planet, blue and gold like a newborn sun. The air vibrated with tension, with centuries of silence breaking at last. Rian stood at the center, his uniform patched and worn, his voice the only sound that belonged to neither side. Kale waited beside him, taller now, wings faintly translucent, scales etched with luminescent veins that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Every breath he took sent faint ripples through the neural resonance field surrounding the chamber. He was no longer just a dragonling. He was the bridge the galaxy had tried to destroy. The council speaker's voice cut through the murmurs. "Captain Salas, the question before us is simple: can coexistence be possible? Or is this truce a dream meant to die in the mouths of diplomats?" Rian's gaze swept across the crowd. He saw old soldiers, ambassadors, scientists, and holographic recordings of those who could not travel across the void. He took a slow breath, his words carrying through the translation field to every mind in the hall and beyond. "You ask if peace is possible," he began. "But peace was never a discovery, it was a choice. I watched a dying mother make it on a battlefield made of ash. She could have cursed us with her last breath. Instead, she begged for her son to live near her a little longer. That was all. And I, an enemy, chose to say yes. He paused. The silence was total. Even the translation systems seemed to hold their digital breath. Her name was Saren of the Emberflight. I buried her beneath the iron sands of Verith. Her child stands beside me now. And I am here to tell you that mercy is not weakness, it is the strongest weapon any of us have ever held. Kale stepped forward then, his telepathic voice echoing through every consciousness. I am born of both fire and metal, yet I have learned to dream as humans do. My kind remembers pain as you do. But we also remember the moment my mother was forgiven. Images filled the chamber, memories of the war, of burned skies, of Rian's hands lifting the dying dragon's head. The projection spread through the council's network, bleeding into every broadcast, every device, every mind tuned to the session. For a moment, all across the stars, dragons and humans shared the same memory. When it ended, no one spoke. The speaker simply bowed his head. Then let it be recorded, he said quietly. The beginning of shared existence. Later, on the surface of Echelon Prime, Rian stood among humans and dragons working side by side, building homes beneath twin suns. Children of both species ran together through the light, their laughter rising like a new kind of music. Kale landed beside him, folding his wings. She would have liked this, he said softly into Rian's mind. Rian smiled faintly. She made this. As the sun set, casting gold across the fields, the veteran looked to the horizon where light met shadow and whispered the words that had changed everything. He can stay. And in that whisper, the galaxy found its new beginning.